Just as she promised, Mever hadn't looked up what a bikini was on the Ommitted. She very specifically didn't look it up. She asked Axia instead. By the end of the week, she was almost sure she'd stopped blushing. After finding out how the word was spelled from her niece, and getting some idea what it was about, she looked up everything she could about them almost at once. Even weeks later, the very thought of a man giving her something so skimpy to wear? As Mever climbed into the shower, the thought still made her shiver. With 2 weeks left before their departure, she had been rising early to get ready for her morning lessons with Tom. The time needed to get ready every day had started taking longer and longer since her fingers began roaming in the shower on a regular basis. Thoughts that began to blend into so many interesting ideas, entering her mind unbidden. The blast of hot water washed over Mever's hair, and she leaned into the spray, letting it cascade over her body as she closed her eyes. As giddy as it made her feel, the first few times there had been thoughts of Chandler. She remembered their times together during their first week, by the seaside when he first came to her. But over time, her thoughts had turned to Tom. Tom's face, and what she imagined his body might be like, blending into her memories of Chandler. But more and more, Chandler seemed to fade into the background. She still saw her husband smiling at her when she thought of him, but when she showered, her thoughts were of the here and now, instead of years past. Tom was there in her imagination, instead of Chandler. Mever opened her eyes as she drew the liquid soap into her palm and turned her back to the hot water, running the lather up along her arms. As she gazed through the steaming partition, she wondered what it might be like to see Tom there. Her mind drifted as her hands moved slowly, imagining him naked before the mirror with his back to her.
Hello down there. I'm up here. This is Captain Jack the Sparrow. My master Vidmori has told me to let you know that we're skipping the not safe for work scene on this video, since there could be small children or a thin-skinned YouTube algorithm watching. However, for all the horny boys and girls out there, I have good news. If you subscribe on Patreon at the £5 tier, you can listen to the full unabridged video and more content too spicy for YouTube. And what's more, if you're a YouTube member, you can DM Net Narrator on Discord if you want the link, since you guys deserve a listen too. Anyway, I've got to get back to my duties now. Goodbye!
Tom was as happy as Mever had ever seen him, and had taken to humming to himself now and then. Even so, she'd seldom seen him so excited when the transport landed in Athens. Leaving as early as they had, the quick trip across the planet got them to the city by its early afternoon. He'd been as happy as she'd ever seen him when they planned the excursion a few days ago, and she hoped that happiness was enough to distract him from her nervousness now, as they left the Balkan sector spaceport and rode into the city. In his college years, Tom explained, he'd been an exchange student to the sector, and the area was key to the development of what he called the Western culture he'd grown up in. Certainly it had a lot of contrast to the Eastern culture he had shown her on their trips to the major continent. As they worked their way through the Central Museum near the Acropolis, Tom laid out plans for their dinner at a restaurant on top of the other main hill in the city. It has a fantastic view out to the bay, and we'll make it there for sunset. Alright, given the time change, it's a late lunch for us, but you have to try Greek-style seafood. I know you enjoyed English seafood and loved the Italian place, but Greek is something all its own. Mever couldn't entirely focus on the marble statues in front of her, though she learned what they were and why they were important. Biting her lip a moment, she looked up at the piece of sculpture. That sounds nice. So, do you think I can buy this one? Tom started, and for a moment he seemed to turn 3 shades of pink before whispering, No, just no, he whispered harshly, looking around to see if anyone was near. You cannot buy the Elgin marbles. This entire sector would explode. Don't even think about it loudly. We'd be lynched. It was bad enough when you offered to buy Las Meninas. The painting was just wonderful, and the children looked adorable. I didn't know it was a cultural treasure until you told me. Well, you knew about the Mona Lisa, and you didn't say that about Michelangelo's David. You know better than this by now. Do you know how much it meant to this sector when the Shilvanti moved these back from London? If you... Tom looked at Mever, his eyes narrowing. You're pulling my leg, aren't you? Just a bit. She caught herself shifting from foot to foot and forced herself to stand still. I just wanted to break the snow with you about something for our last week before we go. It's break the ice, but alright. I'm listening. I thought all we had to do was finish getting things ready to ship. Have I missed something? Not as such, no. It's just... my niece wants to give us a going-away party before we leave. Tom thought that over a moment and shrugged. What's wrong? That's a very nice gesture, and I've gotten to like Axia. I get on with Tanu, too. He still gives me looks now and then about speaking English that day, but I'm pretty sure he forgave me after I told him about Bogart's gangster-era movies. They both like you too, Tom, but this party is being held by my other niece. So far, he managed not to mutter during the early half of the evening. Mever had assured him that his academy suit was both formal and appropriate to the occasion, but the drive to the party had been enlightening. If Webster's needs a photo to define ostentatious, I think I've hit the jackpot, Tom thought, as he looked around at the grand hall and the milling crowd. So, let me run through it again. Governess Alea is your niece, like Axia, but she was the daughter of your Coley Haberin's birth sister? That's your co-wife, who was named Amit? Yes, that's right. So, Alea is the daughter of Amit's birth sister, who was named Olhai. Ole. Right, Ole. And Amit and Ole were out escorting your husband on a trip. There was a crash. I'm sorry, this sounds so brusque, but I'm trying to wrap my head around this without a diagram. There was a crash and they were all killed, so the family title on Amit and Olea's side passed down to your niece, Olea? Yes, Tom. Chanda wanted to go on a family trip and my other co-wife, Shalea, and I couldn't go. No one wanted Chanda to go practically alone, so Ole offered to join them. Mever looked miserable, recalling the accident, but pressed on. When our family circle was split by the accident, that's when I reacquired the minor title I have. It's not unusual to overlook enough of a gap in the weight of a title if there are also lasting family connections involved, and joining what's now my house... House Pelavon, yes. Ole's mother's and mine saw an advantage in joining our houses as being even more important because of Amit and Ole were sisters by birth. Even if the house of Pelavon doesn't have the wealth it used to, the addition of another title was considered a good move. It kept resources in the family, and it's even traditional when houses develop close ties over a few generations. But then the accident happened, so you became the head of your house, while the larger title, held by Ole, skipped directly to Alea. That put her in charge of a lot of wealth and connections from an early age. Tom tried to imagine the web of connections between sisters, aunts, mothers, and noble houses on a diagram yet again, but Mever's patient explanations put him on surer footing this time. Right after graduation, Mever nodded. Alea always had good prospects, but she leveraged what she got from her mother to advance herself. Well, a bit earlier and more ruthlessly than perhaps she should. It's not her fault, really. She took her mother's death badly, and she just wasn't ready to take on being head of a house this size. It led her to be a bit excessive. I think I get that. Mever had worn a dress in academy colours that complemented his suit perfectly, and despite his apprehension about the evening, he'd taken a quiet pleasure as they met to depart. Mever looked stunning, and for any other evening out he would have relaxed and enjoyed just having such a beautiful woman on his arm. Or was he on her arm? He was still pondering that as the estate came into view. Any lingering ease raised a flag of surrender as they were escorted into the garish monstrosity that served as the mansion for the sector governess. In Tom's mind, a gathering over drinks to bid her aunt farewell lost a good deal in translation when stated by the governess, and while he stayed close to Mever during the early part of the evening, he felt a growing irritation. The other guests were dressed far more for a gala ball than an evening to celebrate a visiting relative. Mever moved with a quiet assurance through the crowd and kept a smile on her face, greeting complete strangers with a grace that Tom could only envy. Governess Alea still hadn't put in any kind of appearance herself, however, and as the evening passed into its first hour, Tom started noticing which guests stayed to talk with Mever, and those that quickly found other company. Mever had just finished with a couple who'd been pressing her with questions about admissions for their daughter, when Tom took her hand and pulled. "Mever, your niece is late. Even some of the other guests are muttering about it. This isn't just any quiet celebration, so she's... what? Making some sort of point?"
Well, that is... yes, of a sort," Mever leaned down to whisper. "She is making sure people know how much lower in station I am, even though I'm her aunt. I'm sorry, I didn't think she would go to this length, but when I took a room out near Axia and you, instead of staying here, she must have taken it personally. I'm so sorry. Please don't make a scene. I promise I'll make this up to you."
"I won't make a scene, but half the people here walk away from you, and they look at me like I'm a performing monkey. Really? What's the worst she could do to me?"
"It's what she could do to me, Tom," whispered Mever miserably.
That stopped him short as he thought about it.
"Please?"
Tom sighed, but nodded in acceptance. "Right. Just an hour or two more after she makes an appearance. It's nothing we can't get through together." Mever's look of gratitude had warmed Tom's heart, and he made the best of the situation. One of the longest conversations he had was with an architect who had arrived to do reconstruction work in Chicago. Tom found the male Chavanti exuberant at the prospect of rebuilding a large government complex in an area still in ruins and bringing new life to the city. Mever watched over Tom from a distance while talking to yet another couple, smiling at him now and then. For his part, Tom found Vedex so engaging that he finally broke down and asked the question that had always been on his mind.
"And so, of course, that's why our buildings are always in purple,"
Vedex finished sometime later, giving Tom a smile. Tom stood there trying to process the answer and making sure his mouth was closed. I have to admit, I never would have guessed that in a million years. Tom was just about to ask how long Vedex would be on Earth when the doors to the main hall opened wide. Conversation stopped as the guest turned and looked when the governess made her appearance. Excessive my ass, he thought, as the living embodiment of the word pranced into the room and struck a pose. I may go blind. "Thank you so much for coming, everyone. I'm delighted to see you all. And trust me, I'll be with you at once, but I simply must meet with my dear sweetheart before anything else. I'm sure you all understand." Alea cooed to the crowd as she swept into the room, wearing a cascade of gold lace draped atop purple crepe, all offset by a lavender feather boa that almost completely obscured her face. Beholding the vision with a sense of staggering disbelief, Tom stepped over to Mever's side, just as Alea spotted Mever and bore down upon her. "Ah, there you are. I'm so glad you were able to make time to join me at last. I simply couldn't let you go back to Shul without doing something appropriate for your visit." Alea was loud enough that half the room could easily have heard her. It wasn't a small room, and Tom kept his face a mask of neutrality, as Alea stepped back to look her aunt over. "And the academy dress, that's so wonderfully dedicated." "This is very gracious, Alea. I didn't want to be any trouble, and I can't thank you enough for all the assistance you've given me. I do wish we'd been able to spend time during my visit, but you know how it is." "Why, of course, dear. I do so wish I could have joined you as soon as you arrived, but I have matters to attend to. The Empire never rests. I'm sure you understand, don't you?" "Of course. I'm sure I do." Mever's smile was turning a bit glassy. Alea looked ready to carry on with the childish browbeating, so Tom pushed forward, while Vedex peeled quietly away to blend with the crowd. "Ah, governess. A great honor of meeting you, and so very purple-looking your house," he said in broken Vatica. After a moment he even took a bow, looking pleased with himself, as he beamed guilelessly at Alea. Alea's smile was a picture of childish delight as he looked Tom over. Why, Mever, this is the human you're taking back with you to Shill? And he speaks like that? Oh, this will just be so amusing. I'm sure I'll hear all about the wonderful things you're doing at the Academy in no time at all. Her smile took on a wolfish tinge. Oh, but I can see why you picked him. What a shame you couldn't have brought him around before whisking him away all for yourself. He does look so very much like Uncle Chandler. I must say you run to a very nice type. How delightfully sentimental of you. Mever Professor is very often telling much nice of a Leia governess niece. Always says you show her much kind as family. As humans say, blood of family is thicker than water, yes. And taking time here when important guests look in your way for your time, very humbled, I. Leia paused long enough to smirk one more time at Mever. Well, I suppose if even your human can see I'm needed elsewhere, then I simply must press on. Do message my staff the next time you come to Earth, won't you? I just know I'll remember this evening forever. But you understand how busy I am with so many people. Do have a safe journey. Tom took Mever's hand and gripped it tightly, as Leia flounced off to a gathering in the other corner of the room, and counted to 10 under his breath. Tom, what? You speak perfectly wonderful Vatican now. What were you thinking? I barely understood half of what you were saying, except for making it sound like flattery. And what was that you said about blood of family? It's a saying that blood is thicker than water. Usually it's said by undeserving relatives. Tom looked around a second time to make sure no one was close enough to overhear, and sighed. Hell would usually freeze over first, but I humiliated myself because that cow has some hold over you. I don't like it, but there's no way I was going to let her keep sinking her claws in. I gave her the pound of flesh she was after, and now she's gone. We can leave in a little while, right? Another half hour, I expect, but that should be enough for appearances. Tom nodded to the other room, where they spotted Axia and Tanu moving around the edge of the crowd in their best uniforms. From where he stood, Tom could just see Tanu talking with Vedex, as the pair doubled over with laughter. Good. That should be just right. I just spotted someone I need to say goodbye to.